We always hear about white privilege, but does it really exist? Whites are the majority, and with that there are natural, organic numbers that appear to the uneducated person as a privilege. If it says X number of white kids are accepted to medical school every year and only Y amount of blacks, that doesn't mean whites have privilege. It means more whites applied for it because more exist. Blacks only make up 13% of the total population. Let's be honest. There are as many problems as there are benefits to being in the majority. But if you want to talk about privilege or even institutionalized racism, then let's honestly talk about it. Privilege is defined as a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or a group of people. Okay, well, who has privilege then? White straight males are pretty much the only group of people that are not considered a protected class. Technically, it is illegal to discriminate regardless of race, but it is only enforced when someone isn't white because historically, Caucasian or white males were the majority class in the workforce in the United States. Federal anti-discrimination laws were created and passed on behalf of the minority classes. Do you realize how hard it is to classify an assault on a white straight male as a hate crime? But at the same time, you just say the wrong word to someone in the protected class and it's automatically classified as a hate crime. That sounds like privilege to me. But it certainly doesn't stop there. It is illegal to racially profile blacks, Hispanics, or Middle Easterners, regardless of whether or not they tend to do a certain crime over other races. But at the same time, when there is a school shooting or a serial killer, a federal agent will write up a profile, and it usually will start by saying those crimes are usually committed by a white male. Sounds like a double standard, doesn't it? It's also institutionalized racism and privilege for any that are not white. Affirmative action is without a doubt black privilege. Because of affirmative action, a black C+ student can get into medical school faster than some white A students. Not only does that sound like privilege, but it also sounds dangerous. I don't care what color my doctor is. He or she can be blue for all I care as long as they are the best. But thanks to affirmative action, we are getting doctors that are nowhere near the best. Because of affirmative action, businesses are required by law to hire people of color. Well, what happens when the business owner is a black man or black woman? Or, in fact, what if the business owner is owned by a woman of any color? Suddenly, no one cares if the black man hires all black people or the woman hires only women. That is black privilege and institutionalized racism against whites. That is also feminist privilege and institutionalized sexism. And California is the worst about both. California has recently dictated that a woman needs to be on the board of directors for any company, regardless of qualifications. You constantly hear we need more diversity in film, in comics, in television. First of all, we aren't lacking diversity in those areas due to oppression. But let's pretend we are. Then suddenly you have another conundrum. Film, television, and comic books are all liberal. So if they really were what they claimed, why is there racism in film and television at all? I thought it was the liberals that were supposedly the defenders of minorities. Is it because they are lying hypocrites? Quite possible. Or is it that as a society, the black community lacked the interest in those professions? And even when they were interested in that profession, their low population numbers caused it to appear that these professions had very low diversity. I say the answer is both. But for the longest time, blacks truly did lack the interest in those fields because blacks tend to want to be rappers, musicians, or sports figures. Kind of similar to how women today lack interest in the sciences or industrial manufacturing jobs, causing the supposed wage gap. Only recently has interest in acting and filmmaking and comic books spread on a large scale in the black community. But guess what? They still only make up 13% of the population, so some see that the industry is still lacking in diversity. So it isn't oppression, it's math. But thanks to things like the inclusion rider, now we are forcing film companies to employ more blacks and have more black roles. That's called privilege, people. Not only that, but it is also institutionalized racism against whites. It also rewrites history when you create period pieces because you're forced to add ethnicities that perhaps were not involved in certain historical events. As for sports, areas that are predominantly black like football and basketball, if everyone's so concerned by diversity, why aren't people screaming that there isn't enough diversity in these fields? Why aren't they saying we need more white players? It's because sports doesn't care because they just want the best players. Too bad that rule doesn't apply across the board, especially when it comes to healthcare. But let's be honest, the whole leftist agenda only works one way. Where else is black privilege present? The NAACP stands for National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Well, if a white version existed, it would be labeled as racist. Essence Awards, an award show dedicated to one race, blacks. Now that's privilege, isn't it? Milestone Comics, an imprint of DC Comics that not only sets black characters in their own universe, but looks exclusively for black creators. Yep, that's privilege. And racist, since they segregate the characters from the main DC universe. BET, a channel exclusively black. I don't believe whites have that or are even allowed to have an exclusively white channel. Guess what? That's more privilege. Ebony Magazine, a magazine designed to cater exclusively to the black community. Yep, you got it, more privilege. These are just some of the many examples of black privilege. It's black privilege because only blacks benefit. As a result, others are discriminated against. This is factual, documented, and easily verified privilege. This also equates to institutionalized racism. Meanwhile, everyone goes on and on about white privilege when the only privilege the white community has is being left out of being a protected class.